It's this Luffy. He's the best one. Thank you for clicking. Thank you for watching. Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and unsurprising, we have a lot of different Luffy leaders in this card game. 9 to be exact. But as we enter the OP09 meta of the One Piece card game, there's been a lot of discussion of which purple Luffy leader is the best of the 3 that we have. So I hope to kind of answer that in this video today, and then also kind of go over different deck building restrictions and also just strategies for these decks, as well as have some example deck list at the end. So if you guys are new, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. It means you guys want to see some more One Piece content in the future, and we're going to be making a bunch more in the OP09 meta as well. But let's just kind of jump on into it, and the kind of keystone reason of why you care if you are a purple Luffy or purple Straw Hat to be more specific is this Gum Gum Giant card. This came out of OP09. It's a rare, it's an event, and it says counter Dawn -2. You may trash one card from your hand. If your leader has the Straw Hat crew type, give up to one of your leaders or characters plus 4k power for this battle, and then you get to draw 2 cards. So this is an obscenely strong counter card. It's very good on the defense. It kind of compares to Radical Beam in a lot of ways, another Straw Hat Crew event, but the kind of key differences are, one, we do have to go Dawn -2, which depending on what point of the game you use this could be a little detrimental, but if you're at 10 Dawn, you're going to go back to 10 if you lose 2 anyway, so that's really not a cost. It's more of kind of like a pseudo restriction to not use it until later in the game, which you likely wouldn't be doing that anyways. But then also you do get to discard a card and draw 2, which also means this is a really good consistency piece, right? If you are in the late game, if you need to find another one of your like high-end cards, or worse, if you have too many of your high-end cards, this just lets you get another look at 2 cards off the top of your deck, and it's just super great. Like, there's no real negative for this unless you start using like 2 a turn kind of thing, but the fact that this is being able to just get out of a lot of attacks for 1 and just really convert, and then again, like, your hand size doesn't change, which is the biggest thing, right? With Radical Beam, you lose a card in hand. If you use Gum Gum Giant, you keep the same hand size as the beginning of the attack, which is kind of silly. So I think this is a super solid card and just worth running any of these leaders just because of how powerful this is in the first place. So other than that, like the Straw Hat kind of crew stuff is pretty open-ended. It can be used in a lot of other stuff, and so this is like the main card that is really defining like why you would play a purple Luffy leader in the first place. So we've got a couple other new cards in OP09 just to talk about real quick. We've got Trafalgar Law, which is a Heart Pirates, not a Straw Hat Crew, but it does look at the top 4 of your deck. Reveal up to 1 cost 2 or greater card with Straw Hat Crew or Heart Pirates, put it in your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. So this just is like a really good consistency tool, especially if you're not playing the like Nami will be played in probably the red and purple Luffy, but this is like a good backup for Nami as well. It won't let you find Gum Gum Giant, which is a little bit of a cost for playing this card, but consistency otherwise, this is really good for the deck. We also do have the new Sanji from OP09. So on play, you may return 1 or more of your Dawn cards from play to your Dawn deck. This character gains Rush for the turn, then rest up to one of your opponent's cost 6 or lower characters. So this is just like a way to go for game a lot of the ways, right? The fact that like your opponent can't just play a Sabo and feel safe, the fact that this gets Rush in the first place, does also trigger our leader effect on our black and purple Luffy. So all of that is super solid for this guy, and I think it's something that just makes a difference for a lot of it. We've been playing a lot of like Usohachi from the Star deck as well, but this is kind of like a Rush card and Usohachi in 1, and it's a searchable Straw Hat Crew that's also a 1k. All of this is good. All these are very, very strong effects. And then we also have the Secret Rare Luffy, which personally I'm not a huge fan of this card. It is cool, it's flashy, but I think that there's usually better things to do than play him in the first place. But he says on play, you return 1 or more Dawn from your play from your Dawn deck. Draw 1 card, then this character gains Rush for the turn. So it does draw a card. It's a 9 drop 10k Rush. So there is some pretty good conversion with this too, especially like in Black Purple Luffy. I think you play this one more than the others because of how you can always get that Dawn back afterwards. But I haven't been super convinced with it. I feel like, again, it just is like a good card in general, but I'm not super convinced with it. But I know a lot of people are playing it, so I do want to mention it here as well. Anyways, let's look at our leaders in general now. So we're going to start off with All Reliable. This is the purple Luffy from OP05, which has been out in this card game for about a year. It's been topping occasionally. I think it was really good in OP05, kind of waned off in OP06, OP07, but it's been seeing a big resurgence in OP08, especially with its new star deck support that it got out of this as well. So I think the deck has been around for a while. There's been a lot of people who've been playing it as well, and it's still in a really good spot. And something that keeps this card, I think, viable in general is that it's the best ramp leader in the game right now. So activate main once per turn, can take the top card of your life to your hand, and then if you have 0 or 3 or more Dawn, you can add 1 Dawn active as well. The active part is also a little bit silly in its own way. So generally you want to go first. You start at 1, you go to 3, and then you use your leader effect to go from 4. You can use your Zoro to then play that out, get a card draw, and then at 6 you ramp to 7, and then you can play the new Luffy Taro that you get from the star deck 18. So this is very good. I don't think the other decks usually play Luffy Taro because it's a little bit inconsistent to get to 7 Dawn as quickly, but man, when you do, this is such a good card in this current meta. The fact that you're able to play at another body, you can play either the Zoro or the Sanji, both are very good, and you just get to do it super reliably, right? The double ramp from other decks are just like a little bit like, oh, it's what your entire turn is, or you have to see the cards. You don't get to the 7 drop as easily, and because of that, I think it's a little bit less good in general. But you do get to do that. You also are kind of like, what, a 4 or 3 life leader if you really want to think about it, but you do at least get the card draw with you, and then the fact that we have Gum Gum Giant to kind of restabilize once we get to the top end, I think is very good. I think also another notable card is Charlotte Linlin, which we do want to just ramp to 9 as soon as possible, and then if we do that, we get the reward of like getting rid of a kind of obnoxious 6 cost or lower from our opponent's board if we want, but we also get to heal 1, which is really nice to be able to restabilize in its own way. So the fact that we get this 9 drop 9k body we can continue attacking with the rest of the game comes up quite a bit, and I think it's really impactful. So I think this deck has gone from like kind of consistent in like the first couple sets it was out to relatively consistent now. You get some really good ramp effects, and it's just in a really good spot. So I think this is a pretty reliable deck right now of the 3. And then we got old unreliable. Jokes aside, this is one of my favorite leaders in this meta right now. I think it's pretty unique in general, and the fact that we don't have red purple law in this game anymore means that the red purple card pool is still really stacked, and we just kind of have to find another leader to take advantage of it. So I think Monkey D. Luffy is really good at what it does. It has topped. It's technically older than OP05 Luffy in the fact that it did come out of the Star Deck 10, which was out like a month before OP05. But the fact that this is a 3 life leader is kind of rough, but it is a 6k leader at the same time. The fact that we do get consistent ramp at the end of the game, which is kind of a weird way to put it because you don't generally need ramp at the end, but the fact that we do get a ramp in the first place does help us quite a bit. So again, like there's some weird scenarios where we do want to like we do have to be a little bit consistent on finding our ramp cards, which have been more consistent as this guy's come out. But the fact that this guy is just like a little bit inconsistent on the surface is just because like it is a 3 life leader, and on release it didn't have that many like draw cards or cycle cards, which we've kind of caught up to in this current format too. But one thing I will say that I really think is strong about this leader in particular is we get to 10 cost Shanks so fast if we want to. This card is a menace. Technically, if you really want to think about it, it makes our leader a 7k because it gives minus 1k power to all of your opponent's characters. So if they have a 5k body on the board, they have to invest 2 Dawn on it just to even pressure our 6k leader, right? That's a lot of pressure. That makes it very good in a lot of ways, and it just means that you can kind of ignore what your opponent is doing for most of the game, which I think is invaluable. Additionally, we do also have the useless Captain Kidd, which I think this has been a really good meta for this card. The fact that it has this when attacking effect means that you can get around the teach effect, means you get out of an attack for free. It also means that you're in these kind of spots where if they play their 10 cost Blackbeard, it doesn't matter because you're a 6k leader going to 7k, and then their 5k leader just can't even pressure you at the same time. So I think this uses Captain Kidd is in a really good spot for the deck right now. There's also some kind of weird things that, let's say we're at 10 Dawn, we can play our 7 drop Kidd, or we can attack with our 7, no, we want to play Shanks, sorry, we want to play Shanks first. We go use all 10, we attack with our useless Captain Kidd, which will use a Dawn -1. We can use the activate main of our Luffy leader to get 1 Dawn back, and that means that we are a 7k leader, we have a useless Captain Kidd, a Shanks, and then we also have 1 Dawn open for Gum Gum Giant. That just like wins so many games. Like Like, it just makes it so your opponent doesn't have anything to really do, and then we get to do it again if we have another Shanks next turn. It's very strong, and all of this kind of plays around Blackbeard too, outside of the fact that one of our things is kind of going to be stunned. But I think this deck is really strong. It's been one that I've been playing a lot of, and I think people are kind of underestimating it a little bit. It's been in a pretty good spot as well. And then we've got what I'm going to call new unreliable. This deck is really unique, and I really mean that. It's super duper unique. That doesn't mean it's good. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't mean it's bad at the same kind of thing there. But I do think that this is something that people are testing out a lot of. It's the newest leader for us in this archetype, since it is from OP09. And there is a lot of cool little mechanics you get to do with it. I also think if this came out in OP08 instead of OP09, it'd probably get a lot more people on it, but you do get a little bit of like that crossfire of Teach being out in this current meta. But this Dawn ×1, your characters get +1 cost, which is from like the Star Deck 14 Luffy, but we do get this kind of great synergy with the Sanji from that. It's a Straw Hat crew, right, which is important. The fact that we can get rid of a 5 or lower by playing this out on curve, which is really great. But the kind of most unique thing about this leader is the your turn once per turn. When 2 or more Dawn cards are returned to your Dawn deck from play, set up to one of your Dawn deck, one card from your Dawn deck active, and then 1 rested. So you lose 2 Dawn, but then you get 2 back, and then 1 is active, which is really strong. So not only does this like prevent you from like unramping in a lot of ways, but it also means that you get to get a free Dawn. It means that most of your things cost 1 less, or it's really easy to have 1 Dawn open to put on your leader, are also just really easy to have 1 Dawn open from Gungam Giant. So that is really kind for this. You also have a lot of value tools. We get to play Gecko Moria, which is a very good card, even in a Martial D Teach format, and I think that's something that's viable too. So I think that this is a deck that needs like a really specific brew, though. I think a lot of people have been testing the best way to play this deck. It does have like a little bit of inconsistency because you kind of need to find a ramper on your 3 Dawn turn, and there are more cards that this deck can use because of that, but it does get a little bit inconsistent in that way. And then there's also kind of like some spots where in the late game, like since you are a 4 life leader standard, that kind of catches up to you a little bit, or the fact that you are kind of reliant on your on plays. That is a little bit tougher for this deck, I think, in general. But it's been a lot of fun testing this guy. I think it's very good, and do not let me stop you from playing this. I've been enjoying it too. So there it is. And then also, Robin, this is just going to be a little side note, but if you're reading Gum Giant, it doesn't say a purple Luffy leader. It just says a leader with the Straw Hat crew. So technically, Nico Robin does fall under that. It's something that's, I think, played completely different than all the other leaders we're talking about today. I have an example deck list on my website, and we'll go over it at the end too. But most people kind of lean more towards the yellow package than kind of the purple base that I think the other 3 of these are using. But I think this leader is really unique in the fact that it is really consistent at ramping. It does come at the cost of discarding a card from your hand, but on the same kind of token, your opponent's also kind of losing cards because they are getting hit by this banish, or they have to counter out of this banish attack too. So I think this leader is pretty fair. It's pretty balanced, and I think it's a little bit underrated for people going on into this format, and I definitely think it can top in the OP09 meta. But I do just kind of want to mention it because it is, again, similar to the other leaders that we're talking about today, but it's not something that I think is like in like the same kind of realm of all this. But the fact that we have our new Nico Robin 6-drop, the fact that we can play 10 cost ace, something that's really worth ramping into, I think is very strong. And purple and yellow can be like a really good combination with the right tools. So I do think that Robin is good. We'll go over the deck list in a little bit, but there it is. So, and then lastly, before we go into the deck list, we do have our Secret Rare Luffy. This is kind of like either like a super cheese card or super viable to most people. It is kind of like I don't know. The secret rares in this game are really unique in the fact that they try to make them have these like 1 abilities that you really can't see elsewhere, and this Luffy definitely kind of fits that description. So on play, Dawn -10, play all your characters. Place all your characters other than this one to the bottom of your deck. Then after this, you take another turn, and also activate main once per turn for 1. Add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck as active. So I kind of made this little arrow to say like if you are playing one of the leaders on the left, you should probably be playing this, and then it gets like a little bit worse as you go. But one really good thing about the purple and black Luffy is that you do lose more than 1 Dawn at this. So how this works is if you're at 10 Dawn, you play this 10 cost Luffy, you get 2 Dawn back, 1 rested, 1 active. You use your leader effect to go from 2 to 3. You start your new turn at 5 Dawn. You use your Luffy effect to go from 5 to 6, and then you're pretty much back where you're at, right? Like, it's not like more expensive than like a regular like 9-drop Kaido in most other decks. And the fact that you get like another attack and like the 6k from your leader and everything else, there's a lot of spots where this Luffy just ramps all the way back around very quickly, and you really don't get punished for it, which is really nice. So yeah, the next turn that you have, right, you're at, what did I say, 6? You end your turn 6, you go from 8, you go to 9 with your leader effect, and then you're pretty much like right back where you started, which is not too terrible to kind of use with as well. And then if you have like the 2k Sanji blocker, you can play that for 3, since you're likely going to be at less dumb than your opponent. Red Purple Luffy is in a pretty okay spot, especially since like if you need to get like 1 more attack, this is kind of like our way to get around blockers, is just because you get like more attacks than you are expecting. It's the same kind of thing as like this gets rush, right, in some spots. But the fact that like you go from like 0, you use your leader effect to go to 0 to 1, this effect to go from 1 to 2, taking another turn you're at 4, use the effect to go to 5, and then the next turn, if it survives, you're able to go from 7 to 8 with the 10 drop effect, and then you can use your Luffy leader effect to go from 8 to 9. So it's not that bad with it. You get a lot of Dawn back pretty quickly, and the -10 is not too terrible. And then we also have our purple Luffy, which this one kind of gets a little bit worse. You can, like, if it's like a last ditch effort, you can play this card. You still get to, like, if you're at 1 life left, you can take the life, go from 0 to 1, and then you can use your 10 drop effect. It's kind of like the red purple Luffy, but obviously a little bit more expensive and trickier to do. And then lastly, we have Nico Robin, which I don't think you should be playing it in Robin. You can if you want to. Ramping back up with her is a little bit hand expensive, but you can, like, if you got the Dawn back active when attacking, totally different case, right? But the fact that it's not active means that you go from 0, you start your next turn, you go from 0 to 2, you use the leader effect to go to 1 to 2 to 3, and then you can use this effect to go from 2 to 4. But like, it's not really worth it from my own experience with it. But if you want to play it, you can. But that's kind of the idea with it. But that's kind of all I want to talk about with these leaders. I think there's a lot of diversity in how they work. And even though they're kind of lumped together similarly, there's some differences mechanics-wise and just deck building-wise because of it too. So that's all my thoughts on kind of the surface level. And let's go to the deck builds. And real quick before we look at them, I do just want to mention that all of my deck builds can be found on my website, Eggman Events, which is linked in the description. You can find all the decks I've been working on. I'm updating this page pretty regularly, as well as I change and just do different builds and different leaders. And you can make sure to find my most recent builds and I guess my most current builds on here as well. So make sure to check that out if you haven't already. We're going to start at the purple Luffy. And generally speaking, I think this has not really made a lot of difference on deck building since the new Star deck, right? I think the core of it just really works well with this leader. As mentioned before, the fact that we get to this very consistently is strong. I think the only issue with this is that if we are playing against Blackbeard, they can identify it and prevent you from like getting the Dawn -1. But even then, like, you're still playing a 7-drop 8k, which is very good stats, which they're going to have a hard time removing in Blackbeard in the first place. So the other thing is that if they decide not to discard a card or whatever, you can play out Sangoro, which you get the attack draw with this, whether you're around Blackbeard or not, which is very strong in its own way. And then we also have like our Charlotte Linlin, and I am finding spots for one of these. The reason this card is really good is because we are playing the Zoro Juro, which does let us get the card search for it in that way too. If you like the 9-drop secret rare, you can definitely play it. I will not stop you. But again, I just have found like less reason to play that in comparison to some other cards as well. But I know this build is not like super flashy, right? But it's just the build that works, which I think is really strong. So Law is like a really good searcher that we haven't really seen before, and it can also find itself, which is why we're playing the 4-drop Law from Star Deck 10. And again, this deck is just really solid right now. So there's probably a couple of different attacks you can choose. I also think in general, like a blanket statement about all these is that these are not like the only ways to build these. And purple has such a good card pool, I think, right now compared to other times in this meta, that there are a lot of great attacks you can use as well. I've seen like Magellan in the past, which has kind of fallen off since Teach has been in the meta, but that's still like a solid card in its own way. And there's just like a lot of other like good purple generic tools that if you like them, you should definitely try them out as well. But here is my version of OP05 purple Luffy. And then we've got the red purple Luffy. This is the one I've been playing out the most. I've been, again, really enjoying it. One big difference you get to with this one is that you do get the Nami searcher, which is just better than Trafalgar Law, despite not being able to find itself. The fact that this can find copies of Gum Gum Giant is huge. That makes such a big difference in this deck in general, though of course they do have ways to find it with, again, there's Orojuro. The fact that we also do get to take advantage of the Goldie Roger, which this comes up sometimes, right? If you're able to push them down to 0 life, but alternatively, you get to 0 life pretty easy as a 3 life leader. So if they kind of just go for your face and not really respect how big your board is, or if they try to go for game and you're able to get out of it, there's a lot of times where this can just kind of mildly cheese you out a win. So I think it's something that's worth mentioning for this one. We're only playing one. I do think that this is such a good card in this deck. It's so good being able to just play this on curve, make it so that your opponent has to respect that you are essentially a 7k leader. And this 10 drop 12k in a lot of builds, it's just really hard to remove. And most decks don't really have a great way to remove it quickly. And even if they do, it just means that they spent their entire turn and you already got your 10 drop 12k attack on top of your 6k leader attack. It's just good. It's just not like any other way to say it. I think it's just one of the strongest kind of combos in this game right now is just play out this Shanks. So other than that, again, I kind of mentioned it uses Captain Kidd, has that great synergy with it. We're playing 2 copies of Newgate. I don't super love this card, but I do think it's great in some ways. If you like 8 cost Dragon, that's also a card that's been in my thought process for this deck. Even worst case, if you're playing against Teach, it's got Rush. That's all that really matters in a lot of ways. Like the fact that you get to attack with it with Rush, you can just win the game because of that, or put a lot of pressure. And the fact that you're able to be a Newgate with this extra generally doesn't happen. There's also a lot of weird times where Newgate is a 9 drop, which means that I would there's some weird spots where if I'm exactly at 9 Dawn, I can't keep one open for Gum Gum Giant, which is a little bit tough for to swing sometimes. So the fact that we can instead play Dragon for 8, get some immediate removal potential, or at least immediate pressure, and then likely have 1 Dawn open if we played it at 8 and use our leader effect, I think all that can be very strong for us too. So maybe this might change to Dragon, but I do like the idea of this deck right now. Last thing is that we do have a lot of ramp. We've got 4 Zorojuro, 4 copies of Bon Clay, and also 3 copies of Lead Performance Disaster. This gets around Teach's effect. This sometimes activates out of our life, which we would need. And then also kind of the same thing for Gum Gum Jet Gatling. I know we only have 3 life, so the top deck, top card of our life being one of these triggers is pretty abysmally small, but when it does happen, sometimes it does just win us the game. So 5 chances to win the game off our first life, I'll take that in a deck that already gets the benefit from running them too. So this is my red purple Luffy list. This is probably the one I've spent the most time on and the one I'm most passionate about right now. And then we also do have the purple and black Luffy. This one I would not say is 100% optimized at this current moment, but it's one that I've been really enjoying testing in a lot of ways. I did like the purple and black King deck that we got in the previous meta. I do think it's a little bit slow and clunky. This one's a little bit better in solving some of the issues with it and not being obviously as needed on Onigashima. We do really want to find our 3-drop Zoro, since this does technically ramp us 1 using a combination of its own effect and also our leader effect. But if we don't find Zoro, we also do have this Black Maria, which is a 2k, and this is just kind of I don't know if this was intentional, but this is just kind of how it works. So activate main once per turn. If you have no other Black Mirror cards, add up to 5 Dawn cards from your Dawn deck and rest them. Then at the end of your turn, return Dawn cards from your field to your Dawn deck until you have the same number of Dawn as your opponent. So kind of what happens is let's say that I'm at 3 and my opponent's at 2, right? Well, I can play this Black Maria, I can use the effect, and at the end of the turn, it puts me down to 2, but then my Luffy leader effect puts me from 2 to 4. So technically it still ramps, so that's very good. It's a flexible 2k, right? If we don't find Zoro, at least we have a backup option. And if we're running 4 copies of each, we do get there pretty consistently. And also if we're playing against Teach and they decide to on turn 1, discard a card from their hand, Black Maria can still get us the ramp that we're needing for it. So I think that's just good. Black Mirror might just even be better than Zoro in a deck like this, but I do think that's good in its own way. We can also play an Animal Kingdom version of it. I could talk a whole different video about that kind of thing since we already have the purple and black stuff going on, but I'll digress for this one and just kind of keep it for regular purple one. But this is kind of how the deck works, right? This is how the build works. We do get Gecko Moria, so we do get like some cool like Trafalgar Law and like this new Frankie, which this one works really good with our leader and kind of with only this leader specifically, right? You can still do like a Dawn -1 kind of thing, or the Dawn -2 specifically just means like some decks like this is a bit of an expense to play it, but the fact that you do get to draw, get a +1 card draw is really nice. You do also have to discard first and then draw, which is strictly worse than Queen's Effect because you do get to see your entire hand and then discard the worst one. It's just kind of reverse, which I think is fine for the 4-drop version of it that also has 1k counter, but I think that's great for this deck too, since it is just, again, purple, and you do get the additional advantage for it. But we are playing 1 copy of this 10-drop. If you want to play 2 copies, I'm not going to stop you. And then kind of last card is the Gum Gum Lightning, which we do get from the set as well. Main, Dawn -2. KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 6k power or less. So that just means like you can get removal on something, and then also you're able to like you don't lose the Dawn for it if it's the only way you lost Dawn this turn. So technically, like this is a 1 cost 6k removal, which is really, really good in a lot of situations. So I think this deck is good. I've been enjoying it a lot. I've been trying to find the best way to make it work, in the sense that we are a little bit reliant on our on plays compared to the other 2 decks, and the fact that we're a little bit less consistent on our ramp sometimes. I think this is a really fun deck, and I've been enjoying playing it as well. So this is this build, and then lastly, we do have our Nico Robin. I don't have a lot to say. You can see like this is clearly a yellow deck with just a couple purple cards in it, and we're just kind of mostly working on the triggers. So I'm not going to go over this one too much. I will say like the healing back up after ramping feels really good in this deck with copies cards like Yamato, as well as our 10-cost Ace, which is great. The fact that we can use Gum Gum Giant in this deck, though, it's a little bit tougher to do so because we don't consistently get to 10 Dawn as easily, are the fact that if we do have like these 10 drops that we want to play, and then after we play them, we don't get the Dawn back kind of thing. So they can be a little bit tougher to work in hand. If this card did have a trigger, this would be in this deck 100%. We play 4 copies since we can discard it whenever we want, but without that, it's a little bit tougher to find room for it in its own way. But I do like it a lot. I think this deck is pretty fun and a little bit removed from the other decks we're talking about today, but I do again want to mention it. So that's going to be it though for this video. Let me know what decks you've been looking forward to in this meta, which deck of the purple Luffys you guys think is better, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this meta kind of shapes up to be like in the English version of the One Piece card game. So that's going to be it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.